There we go, check this out. I'm using my iPhone as an external monitor for my camera so that I can check that my face is in focus, which it is, so yeah. Hey, how's it going? By far the most requested type of video for me to do since my return back to YouTube has been, without a doubt, tutorial videos on how I go about filmmaking and photography, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting that, but okay. So I'm going to start things off with this video, which is me showing you how I go about editing my photos. Let me just stress though that this is not a tutorial on how to edit your photos. This is just how I go about my thing, whatever. And a little bit of context, I've never been educated in photography at all. I've never had a teacher as such sit down and assess my work or my workflow for that matter. I've never sat through any lessons. I've never been educated in it. Everything that I know and I do, I've learned through doing it and trying things out, and conversations that I've had with other photographers. So think of this video as less of a this is how you do it and more of a conversation. Let's keep it like that. So if you watch this and see something that you want to put into your work, go for it. And if you feel like you can contribute something to me, feel free to comment something in. Let's get a discussion going down there, a creative discussion on how to make things. So yeah, without further ado, let's do this. So here we are in Adobe Lightroom, where I do most of my editing. It is a part of the Adobe Creative Suite, which I recommend buying, especially if you're a student, because you get mad discount. I am just going to import a bunch of photos from a shoot I did last week with a model in Richmond Park. She has a good face. So while that's importing, I'm just going to talk to you a bit about Vsco. Now you might know the iPhone app Vsco Cam, but they also do a bunch of presets for Lightroom, which I use for all of my photos. Yeah, so they do several packs, and each of these packs have a bunch of presets which emulate film. If you've worked with film before, you might recognize some of these film stocks, such as Kodak Portra. It's one of my favorites. And yeah, they do different packs. I recently just purchased pack 6 after seeing some results from people who use it, and I quite like the look of a lot of them. But I haven't actually used it yet, but I do have it installed. I mainly use pack 1 and 2. I rarely ever go into 3 and 4. I don't think I've ever really gone into... Actually, yeah, I've gone into 3 before. Forget everything I'm saying. You do have to pay for these, but there is a free one, which has a nice selection of some of the presets within these packs. But I do recommend buying some of these. If you do, 1 and 2 are some good ones to play around with. If not, just get 1. 1's a solid one, get 1. And it also comes with the Vsco Toolkit, which helps speed up your workflow. But it is important not to get these confused with like some of the filters that you get on Instagram. These are not, it's not a case of you put one of these babies onto your photo and that's your job done. I use them more as a foundation with my photos, or I look for inspiration, and once I kind of click on one, I can alter it and change it and adjust it, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. It's not a quick process. There is also an iPhone app. I think it's on other platforms, I don't know. But yeah, okay, maybe it's just for iPhone. Also on Google Play, there we go, it's on Google Play. It's a really good app, it's really good. About a year ago, I downloaded it definitely over a year ago, but whenever I downloaded it, and I didn't know as much as I do now about photography, and I definitely learned a lot. It's a very simplistic, it's a bit like Instagram. You pick a filter, and there's a lot more adjustments than Instagram. You can play around with a lot of the stuff, and some of the stuff that I learned about color temperature, exposure, how to sharpen your image and things like that, I learned within Vsco Cam, and then carried on over into Lightroom, which has a lot more things which look a bit intimidating at first, but it's essentially like Vsco Cam, the iPhone app, but a bit more complicated. Yeah, so this is Lightroom. It's really good for editing photos. Photoshop is more of a, I see Photoshop as a thing for doing anything with images. You can do like typography, graphic design, and photos in there, but Lightroom is just for photos, really. That's what it's for. It has everything you need from a few clicks, I find. This is your library where you can see all the photos that you've imported, but most of your work will be done within Develop. So here's the first photo. It's of her closing her eyes. I don't think she's doing that intentionally. So let's find a good one to play around with. I think that's a good one. There we go. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what's over here. So up here you have your histogram, which at first looks really frightening, but if you look down here, as I scroll over these, it highlights those little toggle things here, which, so the middle ground is your exposure, this is highlights, these are your whites, and down here are your blacks and shadows. Now, everything I adjust here is the same as if I was to click up here and adjust it like so. So, just looking at this image quickly, let's just bring the shadows up a tiny bit, and yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. We can bring the whites down, maybe. I don't know what I'm doing. I just play around until I think it looks alright. Some people kind of do their editing just by looking at the histogram alone, but I just judge it solely by, I think that looks alright, let's go with that. So over here you'll find your Vsco presets if you have them. I'm talking to you about my workflow, so I'm going to be using them. Yeah, so I've got all the ones for Sony here. I'm going to go into, I'm going to learn a thing or two here. I'm going to use some of the Vsco Film Pack 6, the Pack 6 ones. Let's see what we got. I think there's some portrait ones here, which have, yeah, there's a lot of that's quite nice. See, like, look, you click on one, you see the effect it has, and then you start to make adjustments to kind of pursue that little vision, a little spark of inspiration that you just had. So let's go with this. I like this one because it kind of gives a little browny tint in the shadows there. That's quite nice. So let's go with that. Maybe bring out the shadows a bit more, maybe? Yeah, let's bring that out. I'm trying not to spend too much time on this because normally I can spend just a stupid amount of time. So anyway, over here, over here is all your metadata. You should always shoot in RAW when shooting on a DSLR because you have so much room to play around with. I can bring the exposure way up and experience little to no noise, which is wonderful. So if I shot underexposed by accident, I could recover it more than if I was to be shooting on, if I was to be shooting JPEGs. So if your camera has a RAW mode, shoot in RAW for most things. Yeah, so everything down here, like your white balance when shooting in RAW, is all things that you can are all things which you can change without losing quality of your image, which is good stuff. Yeah, so on the side here is everything you really need when doing most photo editing jobs. On Photoshop, it's not as easy as finding everything you need all neatly laid out here. You have to go through like the effects stuff at the top here, whereas on Lightroom it's all here. And it's like it's all non-destructive, it's all easy to find. You just go to the toggle you want and adjust it. And say if you shot a bunch of the photos the same way like I have here, all you would have to do to make them all look the same is to highlight a bunch of them and click sync, and then you can select the settings you want to change and click synchronize, and then you go. You see how useful this program is for, say, you've taken a bunch of photos in with the same settings in a studio, or you're doing like live gig stuff or wedding stuff and you want to get through them as quick as possible. this is a great program to do that, and it's also very easy to keep like continuity with your look across all of your photos. It's really easy to manage that and quickly go back and forth and see that you're keeping that continuity. So these presets over here aren't like the filters that you find on Instagram where you just throw it on and that's the end of story. These actually change the toggles. They change some of these up here, but they also change like how saturated some of these colors are, or the hue of certain colors. You can see that all these adjustments that have already been made just by clicking onto that thing. There you go, it's changed the hue of certain colors, the saturation, and the luminance, which is how bright certain colors are. So it's taken down some of the reds and some of the blues and left everything else at 0, and it's done. It's taken down saturation on quite a few things there actually, and your hue. Now I normally play around in the hue. Your orange generally controls skin tones, so you can see when I bring it over here, it gets really red. When I bring it over here, it gets really yellowy green-ish, and I just by slightly adjusting it, I can kind of fix it. Oh, I want it to be kind of ready, but not too ready. Yeah, something like that. And what I normally do is I just adjust the white balance to something which I'm happy with. Now, some people like to say, okay, I shot in daylight, so I will set it to 5500. But it's all up to your eye, whatever you want to go for. You see, when it's quite cold, it has a completely different look to when it's slightly warmer. You see? Very different to very different. I actually quite like the cold one, so I think I'm gonna go something a little bit cold, not cold enough where you can really blatantly see the blue, like that, but around there. It's quite interesting. I quite like that. And then you adjust your tint, which is how green or magenta it is, and that depends on whatever your light source is. And again, I just adjust it until I'm happy. So I think I want a tiny bit of magenta in there. I'm quite happy with that. I'm fairly happy. I normally use skin tones as like a rough guide. Actually, I might bring the... Nah. Okay, I'll leave it. Vibrance is something I normally pump up a tiny bit in my images, depending on what I want. The difference between vibrance and saturation, I don't really know. I kind of see it as vibrance is like a little bit of a punch. You set your saturation, which I normally never really touch, and then vibrance if you want to punch it up a little bit more, but not really blatantly. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm quite happy with that. Then down here you have your tonal curves. Now you can see there's a little gap here. It's not a complete straight line, which means that my shadows, which are down here, have been lifted up. And this is also something which was within the preset down here. Now, one thing that you get when buying any of the Vsco packs is the Vsco Toolkit, which are just some easy to click little things that kind of speed up your just speed up your workflow really. So I can minus the contrast, or minus it even more, or add contrast, save some of the highlights. Fade is something I use quite a lot. Now if you watch this, when I click fade none, it makes it completely straight, and you can see the kind of effect that has. And by clicking on some of these and seeing how that changes it, and then seeing how that's represented on the curves here, you can kind of learn what they mean. So a little bit of fade, you can see that there's a little bit of less contrast, the highlights are brought down, the shadows are brought up. That's what it looks like. When we go to mega fade, you can see that it brings it in even more, like it's brought in even more. This is quite a popular look at the moment. Quite a lot of people like this kind of faded look. I quite liked, actually let's see how it looked before. One thing which you can do as well is go down here into history, and you can go back to any settings. I quite like this, what it already had, where I had this little curve here and the shadows were brought up and the highlights were relatively the same. Yeah, but if I wanted to, I could adjust that slightly. by bringing in a little bit more. Actually, let's bring in a little bit more contrast by bringing those shadows down a bit. Is that too much? Maybe a little bit less. Photo editing is one of those things which drives me crazy. I will edit till the point where I don't know what I'm looking at anymore. And at that point, I go for a walk, I make myself some coffee, come back, and I either realize that I've made some gold, or I've made some shit, and then I start again. But that's just how it goes. I quite like this so far. What else can I tell you about these things here? Let's talk to you about some of the things up here. Now this is for cropping. Now you can also rotate. I mainly only use this for rotating the image just to make sure that it's straight, and this is relatively straight at the moment. But cropping wise, I never really crop in post. I'm kind of against that. If I want to crop, I crop in camera when I'm taking the photo. And there's some also useful things here, like a clone brush thing. I don't know if that's its name, but that's good for getting rid of spots and things like that. Red eye correction, which is something I never really use, and your masks here. But I use this quite a lot. These little mask brush things. I don't know what this is actually called, but I'm going to call it a mask brush. So let's zoom into the face and I'll show you what I do. Now, I don't like the look of really edited images. I don't like the look of images you find in most like glamour magazines, where they look really airbrushed and stuff like that. I don't really like that. I want my images to look quite natural. So whatever I do in here, I try to do quite light. So if I was to soften her skin, don't know if you'll be able to tell in the video, but when I do that, let's just soften her skin quite quickly here, just to show you what it's like. It has some nice presets for what this brush can do. Soften skin, teeth whitening, iris enhance, burn and dodge, which are making elements, parts of your image lighter or darker, as well as adjusting these things up here. And as you can see, like whatever I paint, if I highlight, these are the areas which I've drawn over. So all these settings here, the soften skin preset is your clarity way down and a little bit of sharpness added back up, and that gives the look of soft skin. How that is looks a little bit too unnatural for my liking. If you can see the difference. Okay, that's before, that's after. A little bit too much, I think. So one thing I can do is click on this little thing here, which represents this, and just bring that down. And you can see on the right there what that's actually doing. And yeah, I think I quite like that. Forgive me, that's my computer. It does that every hour on the hour. I find that a little chime like that improves my productivity, because I go, oh shit, it's really late, I need to do some work. So yeah, but yeah, so I do that sometimes with the skin, quite a lot of the time, especially if it's males. I leave it alone. Sometimes people request for me to get rid of spots or make their skin look more healthy, and I do my best. Now I generally go into iris enhance, which is, if you look at the side there, it brings up saturation and clarity a tiny bit, as well as exposure. And I just paint over the eyes, and if there's a little light, you can see there, if I go before, after, just makes the eyes pop there, brings out the colour, and I quite like that. I always quite like that. Then if I click new to add another setting, I go to teeth whitening, which are good for teeth. It makes your teeth really white, which is nice. People appreciate that when you make their teeth look white. But I actually add a tiny bit in the eye, just the whites of the eye, to make the colour of the eye pop quite a bit. Now generally, let me just check that's right. Yeah. If I hold down Alt, I can also erase it fairly easily, just to clean it up. Yeah. So yeah. So this preset is for teeth, not for eyes. So what I generally do is I bring it down quite a bit. But it does make a difference. It does make a difference. So let's go back and watch those eyes. Actually, I'll zoom in for you so you can see. If we go back here, you can see the difference that it makes. Yeah? Okay, makes the eyes really pop. Now what else do I do? Generally what I do is I do this with most of my portrait images. I will go to sharpness and just sharpen the face. I'm still playing around with this. Sometimes I'll sharpen like her entirely, or sometimes I will just sharpen the face area and maybe the hair as well. And I normally do this with this highlighted so I can see what I'm doing, what I've gone over. And yeah, I just highlight these areas and add sharpening. What I used to do was I would scroll down to the adjustment here and add sharpening to the entire image, which is not too great in my opinion, because it also increases noise, which is never good. Noise is not nice. It looks blocky, it makes your images look tacky. Yuck, yuck. But by doing this, it just makes this bit look sharper and draws attention more to the face, which I think is a good thing. It's always a good thing. And it makes it look like I have a much more expensive lens, which is sharper. I use vintage lenses with my Sony A7S, which is why up here you can see this is a cool thing which I didn't mention before. It doesn't matter if you're shooting RAW or JPEG, your camera should show this information up here: what ISO you shot at, f-stop, and focal length, as well as shutter speed. And that's quite cool, because I use the vintage lens, which doesn't transfer any information at all because it's just metal and glass. It doesn't show me what focal length I shot at or what aperture, but I knew I shot this at f2 with a 50mm 1.4. But it does say that I shot at ISO 100 at 1/200th of a second. One thing that it would tell me, one thing that, like, if you did use a modern lens that does transfer this kind of information, you can apply lens corrections, which gets rid of distortion, which wider lenses give you. 50mm actually give you a tiny amount of distortion, and any vignetting that your lens does, and normally it would calculate it for you. But what I generally do is I just go to a 50mm 1.8, because they have quite a bit of vignetting, and you can see like the difference it made there. This is just standard kind of thing. This is the new Canon 50mm 1.8. And now sometimes you want a bit of distortion because it draws attention to the middle, which I do want, but sometimes I don't want the vignette that the lens creates. This is with no lens corrections that my lens gives me at f2. Now if I wanted to, I could get rid of that. I don't want to get rid of it completely, I want to leave a bit of it in. Yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. So yeah, that's lens corrections. So here is my final image, which I'm fairly happy with. I hope you like it. One thing that I do sometimes is I go to crop one by one, click done, and yeah, that's ready for Instagram. I send that to my phone and I upload that to Instagram just like that. But yeah, hopefully you can see that it's not a case of clicking on a preset and there, job done. We can now go home and eat as much cake as we want. It's a little bit more work than that. And yeah, I like this. One thing that I can do now is I can highlight a bunch of these images, click the one that I just edited, click sync, make sure that local adjustment is not selected because those are the details that I did with the brush tool, and obviously I don't want to carry those ones over because she has moved throughout these images. And yeah, there we go. See how quick that was. Now if I wanted to really make these look like the same image, I would go through them all and just do those adjustments to her skin and her eyes, and that's job done. Also, I forgot to mention, sometimes I go down to the Vsco toolkit and click Grain Plus, just add a tiny bit of grain because I like the look of film. I also dislike the look of really clean digital images, and it's kind of similar to my dislike of really clean airbrushed images in magazines. And the grain kind of just makes it look a little bit more natural and just kind of nice, but I don't like adding tons of grain like that. That just looks messy, kind of like really, normally I don't like that. I add a tiny bit of grain. From some conversations that I've had with other photographers, what they like to do is not actually use the grain within the Vsco toolkit, but use the grain in another piece of software which you can go to edit in. Alien Exposure 7 is the piece of software. You have to install it and you just add the grain there, and that does a lot of other stuff which I won't go into too much, but it gives superior grain basically. But yeah, I hope you found this video useful in some way. This has been my workflow and how I go about editing images. Not necessarily how you should go about images, but still I hope you found this useful, and yeah, I guess it's been fun doing this. I might do this again sometime. Who knows what the future can hold? I don't, because I'm not psychic. I'll catch you next time. Oh dear.